Hello and welcome to another Game Nexus arcade video, and as you can see today we're going to be playing, I don't know if you can see my handle that well since the camera's way behind me, Initial D version 2. And of course, as you can see on the top of the screen, this is working on the USA BIOS because this is the export disc, and it only works on export BIOS or American BIOS. So, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to just show some footage. It's going to show you how my controls are set up. I have the full Initial D arcade stage control panel sitting right on my desk. And down below, of course, I have the JVS I/O, which is connected to the pedals and the control panel. So, as I've been saying this, you're probably seeing some footage of like my camera being all floaty around it, showing you how it's all hooked up. I know it looks kind of like a mess, but it's one of those things when you're trying to get like a full-size amusement type thing working at your desk. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but yeah, there it is. So let's go ahead and get right into this, and I'm going to see if I can show you the first bunch of stages of Initial D Arcade Stage version 2. Now, these stages are exactly the same in version 1, but they changed in version 3 a little, so let's get right into this, and I'll start rolling my commentary after the intro. Once I adjust the volume, of course, because it's not loud enough.
And once the system starts up here, what'll happen is, normally this would have a ginormous rumble motor, which you may have seen in the beginning, so it does kick back initialize. But of course, since I don't have the rumble motor hooked up, because you need two other boards, I believe, to actually do that. Plus, I think it'd probably vibrate my desk a little bit too much. It just quickly goes through it. And if you want to run this game, you have to make sure you disable the card readers if you don't have the card readers, because otherwise the game will simply not run. But coming up here in just a couple seconds here is the intro, which actually features a song called Gamble Rumble by M.O.V.E. Very good song. There's actually a full music video on YouTube, which if you search for it, you'll find it. But I will let you enjoy this video. There's going to be a little bit of an audio problem in the beginning, but I fix it in not too long. So enjoy the intro, and I will get back to you after this. And now, if you've never seen it, the original Initial D arcade stage, the original one had a intro with the song was the name of Mickey B, Take Me Baby. I chose the Nissan Skyline BNR 34 manual transmission 6-shift. But then they changed to Gamble Rumble by M.O.V.E. for the last two versions of the game on the Naomi. And of course, this is your Legends of Street mode, which is like your story mode. And since this is the English version, it's going to display it all in English. I'll let you enjoy this so you can read it without me talking over it. Okay, and that's basically the setup story for your first race. More or less, the gist of it is Tak is telling Iggy that he's been like doing a bit better when it came to his racing. So Iggy gets all oversure of himself, and your guy just happens to be there, so he challenges him. And that's just the setup of the race. There's nothing all that amazing for it. And now the song that's playing right now is called Space Boy by, I believe it's like David Rogers. It's a very good song, and I can honestly tell you, if you play this game, you will get the song stuck in your head. But the whole thing with Initial D kind of started when I initially got the Initial D. I got the Initial D Arcade Stage version 2 disc that you actually see me playing right now, and I had found it for $20. And the reason I had actually picked this up is because Luke Morris 1 had did a video where he not only showed the intros of the original Initial D Arcade Stage, but then he actually ended up playing it, which basically told me that you could play this game without having to have an arcade cabinet, and you didn't have to hook up the rumble motor, which was the biggest thing I was worrying about, because I was thinking to myself, oh, if I had this control panel on my desk and the rumble motor is running, it's gonna just vibrate my desk and the monitor's gonna fall over and everything. But turns out from that video I had enough information to figure that this game could be playable, just like all my other Naomi games. So I won the disc. It was like $20, I believe. And considering there were people who actually wanted like $100 or more for an Initial D disc, I figured I would roll the dice. Eventually I did pick up the controls, but the problem is I had no idea how to wire up the controls or if I needed another I/O board, because I don't know if I've shown it in any of my other videos, but the I/O board I have is just the Type 1 JVS Tajama I/O board. But it turns out you need the Type 1 JVS I/O board in order to play this. And the way that the controls actually interface into that board, which I actually got it from the seller of the Initial D controls that I purchased for, which was amazing, $20. I've seen people easily ask for like $50 to $100 for the board. And the next problem that I had was that I had no way to interface the controls with the I/O board because I had no harness. I had to go through all kinds of problems in order to get this, but I eventually on the KLOV forums got a Initial D arcade harness. And after spending like hours upon hours like getting the wires untangled, because they were kind of like all twisted up and everything in order to have them inside a real cabinet, because that's where he pulled it from, I then had was able to connect it, because there's actually only two very small pieces of wire which were needed, and I connected the controls up. And I'll let you see the next part of the thing here before I ramble on, but it's gonna now show you that I completed it and give me my score. Have a little spinning car in the background, and here's your next part of the story. And now the basic gist of the whole thing is that Tak seems kind of disappointed that Iggy had lost, so he challenges your guy in Iggy's car, which for some reason Iggy was like so sure of his car, and then he's like, but that's my car, it's not too great. But yeah, so now you're basically doing the same course, Miyogi, but you're doing it backwards, which is the reverse way. Which any of the courses in this game you can actually do them reverse. But getting back to what I was saying is, now that I remember it right, the initial D-Disc and the controls were actually on at the same time, and when I saw that the controls were available, that's when I bought the initial D-Disc, and it was only a couple bucks to ship it. So I got all that stuff and as I said, I got my harness and everything, and I hooked it up. The last problem is the start and change view buttons weren't wired up. So I ended up having to go on eBay, and the final thing that I purchased was a change view start assembly that had the full wire on it, which would just connect directly into my harness and into my I.O. board. And therefore I could finally play Initial D. It took me a little while to figure out that the pedals had to be grounded properly in order for the accelerator not to cause drag on the brake. And if you want to get a kind of better idea what the time frame of all this was, the end sale date of the Initial D version 2 disc was February 20th of 2014. I ended up picking the controls up on February 24th of 2014. Of course, all that eventually did ship to me, and I was thinking I would be playing the game overnight, but of course that wasn't true. Somewhere between here and there, I ended up getting that harness, but it took forever for me to get it because of all kinds of delays and everything. And then finally, on April 15th, I ended up getting that replacement start select panel, and then like a day or two after that, I ended up having to go to what was it? Lowe's. There you go, Lowe's, the hardware store, and I had to get some security bits because I had to fix a wire in the shifter because it would downshift but it wouldn't upshift. So then I took one screw out of the shift, all four screws out of the shifter, pulled it out, found out that one of the wires from the upshift side was out. So then I now have a fully working shifter, and I took the unwired start change view panel out of here and put the wired one in, and yeah, the rest is history, and here we are finally playing Initial D, as you can see. Now, the way that these games came out is they all came out a couple of years apart. Your original one, which in Japan they were called for some reason Initial D Arcade Stage, but then when we came to America and Europe, which is the export version that I have here, they just took out the whole arcade stage thing and just called them Initial D. So the first one was released in 2002, and then you had version 2, which in Japan came out that same year, and then the US and Europe came out a year later in 2003. And now here's the next part of your story. So the basic gist of the story there is that Iggy was surprised that Tak lost, and of course he blames it on his car. And then this guy, Shingo, who's one of the really big racer guys, I think they called them the Night Kids or something, he's now challenged you because you got his attention by beating those two other guys. But I'll go ahead and say on the record, since I've only had about like 2 weeks or so playing this game, I'm not all that good yet. It took me a while to actually get good enough to actually get through Miyogi without really much of a problem. And if you're wondering why, if you noticed very carefully after the loading, the image changed, what actually had happened is the first race with Shingo here, in the first corner here, something must have happened with my brake where the car slowed down to like 150 km per hour and just kept slowing down, so I just lost that race because the controls got messed up, but I fixed them and then I did this race. But I figured this was long enough, so I cut that out, and I didn't want to have to go through a whole spiel telling you about that just through that whole race. And then in the next race after this, I legitimately lost once, so I cut that out as well. But as I was saying, this version, which in Japan you still had it called Initial D Arcade Stage 2, but here in America and in Europe it was called Initial D Version 2. This was released in, of course, 2002 in Japan and 2003 in Europe and America. And then finally, the version 3, Initial D Arcade Stage 3, or Initial D Version 3 in all other regions, was released in 2004. Now, don't think of these games as, like, sequels to each other. They're really just, like, improvements upon the formula. Like, they took Initial D1, they added some more cars, they tweaked a couple things here and there, and they fixed it. But the thing I find weird about this is, in the version 3, after you beat Shingo here, the Legends of the Street for at least this level just ends. Whereas in this version, you face Zack, who drives the Skyline BNR 32. And honestly, I have no idea why they took the last race from this out, unless I'm thinking it's one of two things. Either they thought 4 races were too many for this level, or maybe people who like for the easy race here thought that was honestly too hard. Because I remember when I first ended up beating him, it took me a good, like, I don't know exactly how many tries, but it felt like a lot, so it had to have at least been 5. Whereas in this gameplay, it only took me 2, which I feel a bit better about that. But, suffice to say, it's been a great adventure, getting this Initial D working. And, if you've seen me do any of this crazy stuff on my channel, you know I like a good project, and this has definitely been one of them. It's been really fun figuring this all out, and there are actually 4 things that connect to the little amp connectors that connect into the I/O board. There's one plug for the shifter, one plug for the steering wheel, one plug for the start change view, and then there are the plugs for the pedals. The pedals and steering wheel go into the small analog interface, and then the rest of it goes into the larger digital interface. And I'm going to let you see the next part of your story here. Now, of course, the basic gist of that story was that Shingo, although he's sad that he lost, he's kind of impressed that you beat him, and he really wants another challenge. And the first time I actually saw that, I thought that I would actually have to race him again, which I was thinking to myself, that sucks. I really have to race him again now, but it turns out not. And the main guy of the Night Kids, Zach here, you get his attention by defeating like his teammate who he didn't think would ever lose, because as you saw before the battle, Shingo said he only lost once. And now this is especially hard because his car is basically the 5-gear version of what I'm driving, so he's a little bit more evenly matched than everyone else. So I really had to drive my hardest here. And as you'll see with the sides here, I hit the sides a lot because I'm just still not too great at steering, braking, drifting, all that stuff. I'll get better as I play this a bit more, but I just wanted to show you a basic gameplay of this because there really isn't all that much Initial D stuff on YouTube. And of course, especially not as much on the real hardware, a little bit more on the emulators. But now, to describe the whole Initial D card thing, like if you noticed in the beginning it said really quick, card RW will initialize. Basically, well, one more thing I want to say is whenever you saw it say continue there, if I didn't have it set to free play, the actual game would want you to, like, insert a whole dollar. And of course, if your operator's machine was set right, it could be a little bit less for continuing. But, you would pay your dollar for playing the game, and then you pay another dollar and you get this card. Through this Legends of the Street mode, you can actually save your car, and after like a certain, like, I think it's like 14,000 points or so, or no, I think it was 40,000 points, your car would get upgraded and your car would keep getting better. And I believe when you had the card where it says player there, it would actually have whatever name you entered in the screen. But it was a really cool system that you could then take your car to different Initial D arcades and challenge people when playing the game, which was a really nice feature of this game. And all the later Initial D games adopted it. A lot of other arcade games such as Tekken 5, Tekken 6, Virtua Fighter 4, they had a card system, which, sadly enough, Virtua Fighter 4 and Initial D both use different card readers, so if I wanted to use the cards for both, I'd have to have 2 different pieces of hardware. And the sad part is when I first played this race, there were just so many times that I lost to Zach, it was not funny. And as I said, I still find it strange that the version 3 leaves this race out, because I can honestly say this is a challenging race, and you get a real sense of achievement when you do eventually win it. And actually, it would appear that I actually left the race that I lost in here, so there that is. But then we're gonna go ahead and see the race I actually won here, so I can actually blab on a little bit more about Initial D here. And what I was gonna say before is every time you'd have to continue, depending on how the machine was set up, you'd actually have to insert another dollar, or I'm not sure if Naomi supported this, but I know some arcade games you can make it half price. So you can make it like $1 for start and 50 cents for continuing. But yeah, while I was on what I was about to say, I can definitely say after really getting into this series, Initial D is an amazing racing series. It's very much worth it. If you have a Naomi, or if you have even a driver cabinet, it's very much worth game to play. The only thing to remember is if you have something like a Crazy Taxi or even like Club Card, I believe, I think it's the shifter is wired up a little bit differently since it uses player 2 up and down. Since you can link 2 cabinets together, the player 2 controls were not utilized on your cabinet. In fact, the Naomi won't even run this game if the cabinet is set to 2 players. it'll say something like caution 51, game assignments not right. So you have to change it to 1 player. And another thing to do is make sure that in initial D test mode that you have the player position as undefined, because if you have it set as like master or slave, if that's how it, I think that's how it has it, kind of like the old hard drive for the IDE. It'll keep looking for the fiber optic connection to the other Naomi in order to connect together, and it'll never play. So you got to make sure you have it undefined as your position, and you're only a 1-player cabinet. And the only other game I have that needs that is I have those Mobile Suit Gundam Earth Federation versus Xeon GD-Rom games, and those games also need 1-player cabinet setup. And as I'd mentioned earlier, another thing is the JVS IO Type 1 board. That board needs to be present, or the game will not even start. What will happen without that IO board? I think I'd mentioned this in the new pickups when I'd showed that I'd actually got this disc. But what happens is the game will look like it's about to go into the game, and then it'll just go right back to test mode if it does not find the IO board. Because I'll think to myself, I have my my JVS Pajama IO, and it's not running the game. But little did I know you needed the special IO board in order to run the game. But yeah, that's a quick view of Initial D. If I get better at this and I do some of the other courses, I will probably have videos of those. But Initial D arcade stage. Well, one more thing I want to touch on real quick here, since we got a little bit more footage, is each version of Initial D, for at least these first 3, they're not really different games. They just add, and sadly, this race and the 3rd one, they kind of subtract sometimes. Like, they tighten up the controls in this version a bit more. The cars seem to run a bit better. And, of course, there's extra races, extra cars. But, if you do have a cabinet or a Naomi, I would highly recommend Initial D. It's a really fun racing game, and of course, if you're into anime or manga or something, it'll be something you'll like even more. So I would highly recommend it, and I will see you later in my next video. Bye.